What would you do if you stopped your luxury car at a red light? And the homeless woman on the corner whispered, "I'm your mother." From the outside, Jack Callahan seemed to have it all. At just 32, he was the CEO of one of the country's fastest-growing tech companies. He had money, power, recognition. His face graced the covers of Forbes and Time. People called him a genius, a visionary, a self-made billionaire. He drove sleek cars, flew private jets, lived in a glass mansion high above the city. But when the lights dimmed and the world quieted down, when he stood alone in front of his bathroom mirror at night, he didn't see the success. He didn't see the headlines or the applause. He saw a man with questions in his eyes. Jack had always known he was adopted. His adoptive parents told him early on, not out of love, but almost like a warning. "She gave you up," his father, Richard Callahan, would say coldly. "She didn't want you. We gave you everything." Forget about her. But Jack never could. Even as a child, he would lie awake at night and wonder, who was she? Why did she leave me? Did she ever think about me? And most haunting of all, do I look like her? His adoptive father was a tough man, a former investment banker who believed emotions were weaknesses. He never hugged Jack, never said, "I love you." And whenever Jack asked about his birth mother, the conversation ended with slammed doors and long silences. So Jack stopped asking. Instead, he focused on building a life no one could take away from him. He earned scholarships, built apps, turned setbacks into fuel. By his late 20s, he'd made his first 100 million. By 32, he was richer than his adoptive father ever dreamed of being. But the hole inside him, it only grew deeper. No amount of money could fill the space where truth should have lived. Sometimes Jack would stare at his reflection for minutes at a time, looking for something, someone, trying to recognize features that didn't belong to the Callahans. He didn't look like his adoptive family, didn't share their eyes, their cheekbones, their posture. That truth haunted him. He had the world at his feet, but no roots, no origin story, no face to put to the word mom. And yet, no matter how successful he became, he never stopped wondering who she was and why she vanished. He tried searching once back when he was fresh out of college, but the records were sealed, redacted. All he got was a single line from a county clerk. "The file is closed, no further information available." It crushed him, but he buried the pain, told himself it didn't matter anymore. He had a company to run, a life to live, a name to protect. Still, at night, he'd feel it. The silence, the ache of not knowing. Years passed, and Jack's life kept rising. His company IPO'd. He joined philanthropy boards, dated models. The world praised him as unshakable. But in truth, he shook often, just never where anyone could see. Then, something happened. Something small, something that should have meant nothing, but changed everything. It happened on a cold January morning, the kind that sinks into your bones and makes everything feel heavier. Jack Callahan had just returned from his father's funeral. Richard Callahan, his adoptive father, had died exactly the way he'd lived, controlled, distant, unapologetic. Even in his final days, he never opened up. No warmth, no confessions, no "I'm proud of you, son." Just silence, and then absence. Jack stood alone in the old study of the Callahan estate. Mahogany walls, antique books. The room smelled like dust, aged whiskey, and cold ambition. It was the only place in the house that Richard had truly called his own, his sanctuary of secrets. Now, with Richard gone, Jack was finally free to open every drawer, every locked cabinet. He wasn't sure what he was looking for. Maybe nothing. Maybe just a ghost. And then, he found it. A locked drawer in the desk. It took him 20 minutes to find the key, hidden beneath a false panel in the bookshelf. The drawer slid open with a creak. Inside, wrapped in a yellowing piece of linen, was a single envelope. No name. No return address. Just the faded seal of the state of New York stamped across the front. Jack's heart began to pound. He sat down slowly, unwrapped the linen, broke the seal. Inside were documents, old, fragile, official, and one photograph. His fingers trembled as he pulled it free. It was a picture of a young black woman, thin, tired, but holding a newborn white baby in her arms. Her face wore a half smile, but her eyes told another story. Grief, fear, and something else. Love. Below the image, scrawled in faded ink, Amara Carter, 1992. Birth mother of Jack Callahan. Photo taken at time of legal adoption. Jack's breath caught in his throat. Her eyes, he saw them. He knew them. His eyes. He read the rest with shaking hands. Due to tragic personal circumstances and severe economic hardship, the biological mother has consented to full legal adoption. No future claims permitted. Document sealed. Then one line stood alone, cold and final. Reason: husband deceased in aviation accident. Single mother unable to provide care. Jack sat in silence, stunned. She didn't walk away because she didn't love me, he thought. She was forced, alone, grieving. Poor, broken. She had no one and they took me. All these years, all the anger, all the lies he'd been told about her not wanting him, they weren't just wrong, they were cruel. Jack felt something rise in his chest, something hot and furious. His father had known. He had locked this truth away in a drawer like it meant nothing. For what? Control? Pride? Fear that Jack might go looking. Well, now he was looking. Jack clutched the photo to his chest. Her face was etched into his memory now, those soft, exhausted eyes. Eyes that still haunted his reflection. That night, Jack couldn't sleep. He sat at his kitchen table, the documents spread before him, reading every word again and again. The name. Amara Carter. That was the only clue he had. No address. No current record, no contact, just gone. But Jack was no stranger to impossible problems. He hadn't built an empire by giving up, and this wasn't business. This was blood. By morning, he had hired a team of the best private investigators in the country. Former FBI. Ex-military, deep-dive researchers. Find her, he said. Anything, I don't care how long it takes. They searched hospital records, old housing registries, church databases, even social media and obituaries. But the trail was cold. Amara Carter had vanished like smoke. No death certificate, no social security record after 1995, no credit, no taxes, no lease. Like she'd been swallowed by the cracks in the world. Jack refused to accept that. She had to be out there. Somewhere, and if she wasn't, he needed to know. He needed closure. To look her in the eye, if only once, and say, "You didn't fail me, you saved me." But weeks passed, and the leads dried up. Jack would drive through old neighborhoods in the city, window down, searching faces in the crowd. He didn't know what he was hoping for, a miracle maybe. And on one particular afternoon, fate heard him. But that was still to come. Weeks passed, then months. Jack Callahan wasn't used to waiting. In business, when he wanted something, he moved fast. Teams mobilized. Plans executed, results delivered, but this was different. No corporate strategy could guarantee success here. No algorithm could find someone who no longer wanted to be found. Still, he didn't stop. He couldn't. The image of that photograph, the young woman holding him as a baby, her eyes full of love and fear, lived in his mind like a ghost. Amara Carter. The name pulsed in his thoughts day and night. He whispered it under his breath sometimes, almost like a prayer. He had everything: wealth, fame, power, but without her, it all felt hollow. He needed to find her. He needed to know the truth from her lips. He needed to look her in the eyes and say the words he'd waited a lifetime to say. I never blamed you. Not once. His investigators hit dead end after dead end. They searched every public record, even scouring old shelters, churches, and hospitals in upstate New York and Brooklyn, where the adoption had been filed. Every time they called him with a new lead, his heart would jump. Every time the lead turned cold, it sank again. Amara had vanished. No employment history. No bank accounts. No known aliases. She may be deceased, one of the agents said gently one afternoon, sliding a list of unclaimed bodies across the desk. We could test some of these remains against your DNA? Jack's stomach turned. No, he said. We're not done. On particularly hopeless nights, Jack would sit in his penthouse library, lights dimmed, staring out across the city skyline. It was ironic. He had built systems that mapped out human behavior, created algorithms that could predict a person's next move, but he couldn't find the woman who gave him life. He'd once stood on the TED stage and explained how technology could solve any problem, but it couldn't solve this. Sometimes he imagined her older now, walking slowly down some quiet street, maybe with grey in her hair and tired feet. Did she still think about him? Had she tried to find him too? Had she wondered what kind of man her son became? Those thoughts twisted deep inside him. He didn't want revenge. He didn't want confrontation. He just wanted her. One day, he visited the old social services building where the adoption was processed. It was small, tucked into a fading brick complex on the edge of Queens. He walked the halls slowly, looking at the chipped paint, the faded plaques, the waiting chairs that hadn't been replaced in decades. An elderly woman behind the desk recognized his last name. Callahan? She said softly. You were one of ours, back in the 90s. Jack nodded. Do you remember her? He asked. Amara Carter. She would have been young, maybe alone. The woman's brow furrowed. I remember the name, she whispered. She was quiet, looked scared. Came in carrying a baby wrapped in a blanket, too thin for winter. She looked at him with sad eyes. You don't forget a mother who cries the whole time she's signing away her child. Jack's throat tightened. She didn't want to let you go, the woman added. She did it because she believed it would give you a better life. He left the building shaken. That day, the investigators called again. Another dead end. The silence that followed was heavier than before. And then, something shifted. A new investigator joined the team, a woman named Clara Reynolds. She had grown up in the foster system herself. She understood the kind of pain Jack didn't speak aloud. People like your mother, she told him one evening, they don't just disappear. They fall through the cracks. And sometimes, they end up living in the places no one thinks to look. What do you mean? Jack asked. I mean, Clara said, if we're searching databases and credit reports, we're assuming she still has a stable identity. A home, a phone. But what if she doesn't? Jack froze. You think she might be homeless? Clara didn't answer right away. I've seen it before, she said quietly. Women with no support system, no resources. Especially women of color. The system lets them fall. Jack sat in silence, the idea chilling him. Had he passed her on the street? Walked by her without knowing? Was she out there, invisible? He turned toward Clara. Then that's where we start looking. From that moment on, the search changed. They began walking the streets. They visited soup kitchens, free clinics, missions, and parks where the forgotten gathered. They passed out flyers, asked questions, described her as best they could. Black woman, early 60s now, used to live in New York. Name might be Amara. Sometimes people shook their heads. Sometimes they gave false leads. Sometimes they just stared, broken by their own battles. Jack didn't care. He kept searching. He traded his private jet for worn sneakers, traded investor meetings for city shelters. And slowly, a new version of himself began to emerge, a man stripped of power, of image, of ego, just a son looking for his mother. One cold afternoon, he stood on a street corner in a rundown part of the Bronx, handing out meals with the church group. Snow began to fall. As he packed up boxes, he turned his head toward the crowd one more time, and his breath caught in his chest. She was there. He didn't know how he knew, but he knew. The air was crisp that afternoon, the kind of cold that made your breath visible and your hands buried deeper in your coat pockets. Jack Callahan had just left a lunch meeting with investors in the historic district, a part of the city where cobblestone streets met crumbling brick buildings and shadows held stories too tired to be told. He wasn't in the mood for small talk or handshakes. Lately, even success felt like noise. His driver had offered to take him back to the office, but Jack waved him off. He needed air, he needed space, so he got behind the wheel of his orange supercar and cruised slowly through the narrow streets, one hand on the steering wheel, the other resting on a folded photograph in his coat pocket, the photograph of a young woman holding a baby, her eyes haunting him more each day. He passed storefronts, shuttered apartments, bus stops. The city blurred, but the picture in his mind stayed sharp. Her eyes, her hands, her name. "Where are you, Amara?" He turned a corner, and traffic slowed. A food delivery truck was double-parked, backing up movement for blocks. He sighed, rolled to a stop, drumming his fingers absently on the dashboard. Then he looked left, just a glance. Casual, automatic, but that one glance shattered everything. She was there. Across the street, standing at the edge of the sidewalk, barely upright under the weight of a lopsided cloth sack. Her frame was thin, her coat threadbare, her shoes, if you could call them that, were torn at the soles, and her feet looked swollen with cold. She kept her eyes to the ground, as if the world no longer deserved her gaze. But Jack saw her, and something inside him knew. He gripped the steering wheel, breath caught in his throat. It's her. He barely registered the cars behind him blaring their horns. He slammed on the brakes, threw the gear into park, and flung the car door open in the middle of traffic. "Sir!" someone yelled. Jack didn't hear them. He stepped into the street like a man possessed, eyes locked on the woman across the road. She didn't see him at first. She was too busy adjusting the sack over her shoulder, too tired to notice the man in a $1,000 coat stepping toward her. Then she looked up. Their eyes met. Jack stopped breathing. Her face was older, weathered by life. But those eyes, they were the same, exactly as he remembered them in the photograph. He walked faster now, across the street, onto the sidewalk. People moved around him, annoyed, curious, indifferent. He didn't care. He reached her, just a few feet away, and for a moment he froze. "How do you say it? How do you tell a stranger they're your mother?" His voice cracked before it even left his throat. "You." She blinked, confused, clutched the sack tighter. He swallowed hard, stepped closer. "You're my mother." The words hung in the cold air between them. The woman stared at him, bewildered. "I'm sorry?" she said hoarsely. Jack reached into his coat and pulled out the photograph, the one that had lived in his pocket for months now, the one he had studied like scripture. He unfolded it carefully and held it out to her, hands trembling. "Look," he said softly. "Please. It's you and me. I've been searching for you." She took the photo with shaky fingers. Her eyes scanned it slowly. Her body stiffened. A sharp gasp escaped her lips. Her free hand flew to her mouth. "No, no," she whispered, stumbling back a step. "That can't be." But it was. Jack nodded, tears welling in his eyes. "I know everything now. About the adoption. About the photo, about what they made you do. She stared at the image like it might vanish if she blinked. I held you in that picture, she choked. But they said I'd never see you again. They said it was the only way. Her knees buckled. Jack caught her before she fell. He gently lowered her onto a nearby bench as the city pulsed around them, cars, footsteps, life moving on. But for them, time stopped. I'm Jack, he whispered. But I was born as your son. She looked up at him through tear-glassed eyes. My name is Ava, she said. And just like that, the pieces clicked into place. Ava Carter, the name from the file, the name he had whispered into the dark for years. Jack dropped to his knees beside her. You didn't abandon me, he said softly. You saved me. She let out a cry, raw and broken. Her frail hands reached for his face. I never stopped loving you, she wept. Not one day. I begged God just to know you were alive, just to see you, even once. He pulled her close. And on a freezing street in the middle of New York, the millionaire and the beggar, mother and son, held each other for the first time in 32 years. People passed by, some staring, some curious, some whispering. But Jack didn't care. All he could feel was her heartbeat against his. All he could hear was the sound of her sobs blending with his. He had found her, at last. The city moved on around them. Taxis honked, conversations buzzed. A delivery man yelled at someone across the street. But on that worn-down bench at the edge of the sidewalk, Jack Callahan knelt beside a woman the world had forgotten. A woman who had once held him in her arms as a baby. Ava Carter, his mother. He clutched her weathered hands like they were lifelines, and to him, they were... He'd built tech that connected millions of people, but this was the first time he truly felt connected to himself. Ava trembled as she held the faded photograph, the same one Jack had stared at for months. In it, she was young and tired, holding a newborn wrapped in a thin blanket. She shook her head slowly, like her mind couldn't quite accept it. I thought I'd dreamed about you so long. I didn't believe you could be real anymore, she whispered. Jack's voice was low, careful, like speaking too loudly might shatter the moment. I've been searching for you for so long. I needed to know who I came from, why you left. Ava blinked, and a tear slipped down her cheek. I didn't leave, she said softly. I was taken. Jack felt those words slice through him. Ava took a deep breath, ragged, uncertain, then began to speak. I was 23 when I had you, she said. Your father, Matthew, he worked on private planes. A mechanic. Smart. Always smelled like jet fuel and coffee. A small, broken smile tugged at her lips. We didn't have much, but we had each other. Then one day, there was a crash. A private plane went down. Engine failure. She paused, eyes distant. He was supposed to be off that day, but someone called in sick. He went into cover. Jack stayed still, holding her hands. After the funeral, everything disappeared. We didn't have insurance. I couldn't pay rent. I barely had food, and then you came early. I didn't even have a crib, just a shoebox lined with towels. Her voice cracked, but she pushed on. I loved you, Jack. I loved you so much, but I was scared. Starving, alone. I didn't have family. No one. Jack's heart thudded against his ribs. You could have kept me, he whispered. We would have figured it out. Ava looked down. I tried. She pulled the photo closer to her chest. But the state said I was unfit. They said I was unstable. And there was this man, he worked for the agency, told me adoption was the only way, that they had a family lined up, that you'd go to a good home. Jack frowned. They forced you? She nodded slowly. They said if I signed, you'd be safe. If I didn't, they'd take you anyway, but I wouldn't get to hold you again, not even for a goodbye. Her voice broke. Tears streamed freely now. They told me to smile for the picture, said it would be part of the file. I didn't want to, but I thought if I did everything right, you'd at least be okay. Jack's throat tightened. He reached up and gently wiped a tear from her cheek. They lied to both of us, he said quietly. Ava looked into his eyes, still not fully believing this moment was real. I thought you'd grow up hating me, she whispered, thinking I abandoned you. That I didn't want you. Jack shook his head. I didn't hate you. I never understood. No one told me anything except that you were gone, that you didn't care, that I should be grateful. A long silence followed, the kind that doesn't need to be filled. Then Ava spoke again, softer now. I used to sit on park benches at night, looking up at windows in high-rise buildings, wondering if you were behind one of them. If you were warm, if you were safe. Jack let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. I was safe, he said, but I wasn't whole. He looked down at her hands rough from years of struggle, fingers thin and shaking. You gave me life, Ava, and they tried to bury you like you were a mistake. But I've seen the truth now. She leaned forward, forehead resting against his shoulder. I've dreamed of this moment every night for 30 years, she sobbed, and I always woke up before I got to hold you. Jack wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close. You're not dreaming now, he whispered. People walked by, some staring. A businessman slowed, looked confused, then kept walking. A teenager pointed at Jack's car and tried to take a picture. But Jack didn't care. This moment wasn't for the world. It was for him. And her. Finally, Ava pulled back slightly, wiping her eyes. You shouldn't be here with me, she said quietly. Look at me, I have nothing. You're a man of the world. Jack smiled, eyes full of something deeper than pity recognition. You have everything I've been missing, he said. And from this moment on, you're not doing life alone anymore. Ava looked away, ashamed. I don't even have a place to sleep tonight. You do now. He stood up, offered her his hand. Come with me. She hesitated, years of hardship teaching her not to trust moments like this. But she looked at his eyes again. And something told her this was different. Slowly, she nodded. Jack helped her to her feet, and for the first time in decades, Ava Carter stood tall, not as a forgotten woman on a sidewalk, but as someone's mother. The ride home was quiet, not the awkward kind of quiet, not even the stunned silence that follows something too big for words. It was something else, something sacred, a silence thick with emotion, with realization, with two hearts learning how to beat in rhythm again. Ava Carter sat in the passenger seat of her son's bright orange supercar, the soft leather hugging her thin frame like a foreign memory. Her hands trembled on her lap, not from cold but from disbelief. She had imagined this moment in her dreams, but in those dreams, she always woke up before it lasted. This time, the engine purred beneath her feet, and the skyline blurred past her window. This time, it was real. Jack glanced over at her every few seconds, as if afraid she might disappear if he looked away too long. You okay? He asked softly. Ava nodded, then whispered, I don't think I've been this warm in years. Jack blinked back, the sting behind his eyes. When they pulled into the underground garage of his building, Ava gasped softly. Marble floors, chandeliers, a doorman in uniform. She looked down at her clothes' torn sleeves, worn shoes, her life in a bag by her side, and instinctively pulled her coat tighter. I don't belong here, she murmured. Jack turned off the engine, unbuckled his seatbelt, and looked directly at her. You do, he said. You've always belonged somewhere safe. Somewhere dignified. You just haven't been given that chance. Ava didn't move. Jack, I haven't taken a shower in weeks. I can't walk into a place like this. You're walking in with me. I have nothing. You have me. He said it with such calm conviction that Ava finally nodded. They stepped out of the car, and Jack walked proudly beside her, not hiding, not hesitating. Upstairs, the elevator doors opened to a private residence that looked more like a five-star penthouse than a home. Floor-to-ceiling windows bathed the room in golden light. Hardwood floors gleamed, a modern fireplace crackled gently in the corner. Ava stepped inside like someone entering a cathedral. She took one slow step, then another, until she was in the middle of the living room, staring out at the skyline. Her bag slipped from her shoulder and fell to the floor. Jack stood back, watching her. Back. "Is this yours?" she asked quietly. He nodded. "Yes." Her hands fluttered to her chest. "No one's ever brought me anywhere like this before." Jack walked to the kitchen and poured her a glass of water, handed it to her carefully. "You don't have to say anything right now," he said gently. "Just rest. Let the world wait." That night, Jack called in every favor he had. His assistant, Clara Reynolds, arranged for a doctor to visit first thing in the morning. New clothes were ordered. A guest room was prepared, fresh sheets, soft lighting, a view of the river. Ava stood at the edge of the room, her fingers brushing the fabric of the bedspread like she didn't believe it was real. "I don't deserve this," she said softly. Jack shook his head. "You gave me life," he replied. "Now let me give something back." She turned to him, tears rising again. "You don't have to do this. You're a powerful man. You don't owe me anything." Jack stepped forward and took her hands in his. "You're wrong," he said. "I owe you everything." The next morning, the doctor came, a kind, middle-aged woman named Dr. Grace Howard, who treated Ava with the respect she hadn't felt in decades. She ran tests, asked questions gently, made notes. "She's malnourished, dehydrated, and has some joint damage from prolonged exposure to the cold," Dr. Howard explained privately to Jack afterward. "But nothing we can't treat with time, nutrition, and stability." Jack nodded, already texting Clara to schedule follow-up appointments and physical therapy. Later, he made breakfast, or at least tried. Ava watched him burn the toast and break the yolk on the eggs with amused disbelief. "You really don't cook, do you?" she said, a soft smile on her lips for the first time. "Nope," Jack replied. "But you'll learn I'm pretty stubborn." She laughed, a quiet, breathy sound that hadn't left her lungs in years. Jack froze, stunned by how beautiful it was. He didn't say anything. He just smiled and slid the plate toward her anyway. "Burnt toast, for the woman who gave me everything." That afternoon, they sat together by the fireplace. Ava, in a thick robe and slippers Jack had insisted she wear, cradling a mug of tea in her hands. She stared into the flames for a long time before speaking. "You know, when I signed those papers, I thought I'd never see you again. They made me believe I'd ruined your life by trying to keep you. That letting you go was the only good thing I'd ever done." Jack looked over at her, eyes filled with quiet grief. "They lied to you." "I know that now," she whispered, "but it's hard to forget the guilt. It stays with you. It changes how you see yourself." Jack reached across and gently took her hand. "You don't have to explain anymore," he said. "You've carried that weight alone for too long. Let me help you carry it now." Ava squeezed his hand, her fingers still fragile but strong in that moment. And for the first time in over 30 years, she didn't feel like a mistake. She felt like someone's mother again. Ava Carter stood at the edge of the balcony, wrapped in a soft knit sweater, her fingertips resting gently on the glass railing. It was early morning. The city yawned awake below her, a horizon of blinking lights, delivery trucks, and lives beginning another day. But for Ava, every sunrise now felt like a miracle, not because it was beautiful, but because she had made it to see it. For the first time in over 3 decades, she had a bed, a warm shower, food that didn't come from a trash bin or a soup line, and a son who looked at her like she was something precious, not broken, not burdened, but loved. Inside the penthouse, Jack Callahan brewed coffee the way Ava liked it now, strong, with just a splash of cream. He watched her from the kitchen, taking in the peaceful way she stood, her posture straighter, her eyes more alive than they'd been days ago. In just 1 week, she had begun to change. The doctor came daily. Physical therapy started. Her appetite had returned. Her laugh came more easily, sometimes unexpected, sometimes full and rich, like it had been waiting inside her all these years. And she had a voice now. Not the quiet, unsure murmur of a woman bracing for rejection, but the steady rhythm of someone remembering who she used to be. Later that day, Jack took her shopping. She resisted at first. "I don't need anything fancy," she'd said. "I'm not buying fancy," Jack replied. "I'm buying you clothes that fit the woman you are, not the life you had to survive." They visited a quiet boutique, one with privacy, patient staff, and soft lighting that made Ava feel less like a stranger in a new world. As she stepped out of the fitting room in a dark green blouse and tailored slacks, Jack's jaw slackened. "You look incredible," he said. Ava blushed. "I look like someone else." "No," Jack said. "You look like yourself, finally." A tear welled in her eye, but she blinked it back. She'd cried enough. Now it was time to live. That evening, Jack had a formal gala to attend a charity dinner hosted by one of his company's partner foundations. He wasn't planning to go, but Ava surprised him. "You should," she said. "You can't pause your life for me." He looked at her. "I'm not pausing," he said. "I'm rebuilding it with you in it." She smiled, touched his arm. "Still, go, be seen." He hesitated, then glanced back toward his bedroom. "You'll come with me." Ava froze. "Jack, no, I can't walk into a room full of billionaires. I've got scars on my hands. My shoes still feel like they belong on the sidewalk." "I don't care what's on your feet," he said. "I care who you are. And I want the world to see that." 2 hours later, Ava stood in front of the floor-length mirror in Jack's guest room, unsure whether to laugh or cry. She wore a simple black dress Clara had picked up earlier, elegant, long-sleeved, soft against her skin. Her hair was gently curled, her makeup light, natural. She looked unfamiliar, not because she was pretending, but because she was becoming. When they arrived at the gala, whispers began immediately. Jack Callahan had never brought a date to a public event. He didn't need arm candy. He didn't play the press. And yet, here he was, walking into a ballroom with an older black woman on his arm. People stared. Photographers tried to identify her. Some murmured behind champagne glasses. His new assistant? Family friend? No, wait, is that his mother? Jack didn't flinch. He didn't rush past. He stood tall, smiling proudly, offering Ava his arm like she was royalty. And in that moment to him, she was. During dinner, he leaned in and whispered, "You okay?" Ava nodded, eyes sparkling. "I used to watch women in dresses like this walk by when I slept on the subway," she said. "I never hated them. I just thought, maybe in another life." Jack smiled. "You're not in another life. You're in this one." After dessert, a journalist approached. "Mr. Callahan, may I ask who's your guest tonight?" Jack didn't hesitate. "This is Ava Carter," he said clearly, his voice ringing through the room. "My mother." The reporter blinked. "She's—" Jack nodded, unwavering. "She gave me life. I just took far too long to find her." Back at the penthouse, long after the cameras and conversations faded, Ava sat on the edge of the bed, holding the evening in her hands like something fragile. Jack appeared at the doorway, undoing his tie. "You were brilliant tonight," he said. "I was terrified," she replied. "But you stood tall." She looked up at him. "I didn't feel invisible," she said quietly. Jack's throat tightened. Good, because from now on, I want you to remember something. What's that? You're not alone anymore. Ava smiled, eyes brimming. She nodded once, slowly. I believe you. The days that followed were slow and quiet, the kind of quiet that heals more than any medicine could. Jack Callahan scaled back his schedule. He worked remotely. Let meetings wait, let deals pause. He'd spent most of his life building an empire, but now what mattered most wasn't across a boardroom table. It was sitting by his fireplace, in a soft robe, sipping chamomile tea, relearning how to rest. Ava Carter didn't speak much those first few days after the gala, but Jack didn't push her. Some silences he'd learned needed to be respected, not filled. One evening, after dinner baked salmon, Ava's favorite, she looked up from her plate and said something unexpected. I used to hum to you, she said. Jack glanced over. In the hospital. When they were preparing the paperwork, you were wrapped in a blanket, asleep in my arms. A pause. I didn't know what would happen next. But I remember one thing I kept humming to you, something soft, something that kept me calm. Jack leaned forward. What was the song? She hesitated, then smiled faintly. It wasn't a real song. Just a made-up tune, no words, just comfort. He nodded, eyes locked on hers. Will you hum it now? She blinked, surprised, and then, softly, barely a whisper, she did. It was simple, gentle. 3 or 4 notes, repeating like a lullaby written in another lifetime. And when she finished, Jack had tears in his eyes. That sound, he said, I think I've heard it in my dreams. In the weeks that followed, the conversations came more easily. Late at night, wrapped in blankets, they sat side by side and traded stories. She told him about growing up in Baltimore, how her mother died young, how she learned to sew by candlelight, how she met his father, Matthew, at a bus stop, how they used to dance barefoot in the kitchen long before tragedy knocked on their door. Jack listened, wide-eyed, like a little boy again. And then, slowly, he began to open up too. He told her about the Callahans, the coldness of Richard, the rigid expectations, the silence that always settled around him like fog. He told her how lonely it felt to grow up in a house full of wealth, but not warmth. I used to stare in the mirror, he said, and wonder who I really looked like. I tried to see my face in his, but it never fit. Ava reached out and touched his cheek. You look like your father, she said softly, but those eyes. Those are mine, Jack smiled. I always thought so. They cooked together or tried to. Ava laughed, watching him chop vegetables like he was defusing a bomb. You run $1 billion company, she teased, but you can't even slice an onion. Some things take practice, he said, grinning. They burned a few dinners, oversalted one, dropped a tray of roasted potatoes on the floor once, and both burst out laughing like kids. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. Clara, Jack's assistant, came by one afternoon to check in. She brought flowers for Ava and a box of old photo albums from storage. I thought these might help, she said. Ava sat on the couch and opened them slowly, like she was touching history. There were pictures of Jack in grade school, gap-toothed smile, bowl haircut. Photos of science fairs, soccer games, high school graduation. Look at this, Ava whispered, holding one up. You were wearing a blue cap and gown. I wonder if I was walking past that stadium that day. Jack looked at the photo, then at her. You were always closer than I knew. One night, as they sat watching the flames flicker in the fireplace, Ava spoke again, quieter this time. I was so scared you'd resent me. I don't, Jack said. I was scared I'd ruin your life by coming back into it. You didn't, he replied. You sure? Jack turned toward her, voice steady. Do you know what you gave me, Ava? She looked unsure. You gave me truth. That's more than anyone else ever did. The next day, Jack made a decision. He brought a notepad to the breakfast table and slid it across to her. "What's this?" she asked. "I want to write it down," he said. "Our story, every part of it." Ava raised an eyebrow. "Why?" "Because it matters. Not just to us, but to someone out there who might feel lost. Someone who thinks they're forgotten. Someone who thinks it's too late." Ava touched the edge of the notepad. "Okay," she said, "but only if I get to write some of it too." Jack grinned. "It's your story as much as mine." And so they began. Each morning, they'd write one memory at a time. One hurt, one healing, one rediscovered joy. Some pages were messy, tear-stained, raw. Others were filled with laughter. They weren't writing a bestseller. They were writing something better, something true. A son and a mother, separated by circumstance, reunited by grace, learning, day by day, how to belong to each other again. The news broke on a Thursday morning. Not a leak, not a scandal, not some clickbait headline spun by gossip blogs. No, this came directly from Jack Callahan himself. A photo, posted to his verified social media accounts, showed him sitting beside Ava Carter in the sunroom of his penthouse. She wore a soft green sweater. He wore no jacket, no tie, just a plain white shirt and the kind of smile that didn't belong to a CEO, but to a son. The caption was simple. 32 years ago, my mother was forced to let me go. This year I found her, and I've never been more whole. Meet Ava. She gave me life. Now I get to give her back the dignity this world tried to take. The post went viral in hours, not because it was dramatic, not because it was curated to perfection, but because it was real. People across the country, across the world, felt something shift in them as they read it. Tens of thousands of comments poured in. "I haven't spoken to my mom in years. I'm calling her today. This gave me hope for the mother I never knew. Thank you, Jack, for showing that family isn't just who raises you, it's who you choose to heal with." At first, Ava was nervous. She hadn't asked for attention. She hadn't imagined the world would care about a woman who once slept in abandoned train stations and lined her shoes with newspaper to survive the winter. She watched the screen as messages kept flooding in. From veterans, from women's shelters, from foster kids, from other mothers who had to give up their children because no one helped them stay. This is too much," she said quietly. Jack took her hand. "No, it's just enough. You matter to people. Your story matters. But what if people judge me? What if they see what I was?" Jack looked at her. "They'll see who you are." That weekend, Jack was invited to speak at a national summit on equity in tech, an annual event where the most powerful names in business gathered to talk about money, innovation, and change. He usually spoke about algorithms or global expansion. But this time, he walked on stage with a different agenda. No slides, no pitch, no polish. Just a man with a microphone and a truth he no longer wanted to keep private. He began. "I've spent my entire adult life trying to be the man who has all the answers. The one who built things, fixed things, predicted the future. But there's one thing I couldn't predict, that the greatest breakthrough in my life wouldn't be in tech. It would be in my living room holding hands with the woman who gave birth to me and was told she'd never see me again." The room was silent. Some blinked, others sat still, stunned. Jack continued. "My mother, Ava Carter, was forced by circumstance and a system that favors the powerful to sign away her child. For over 3 decades, she lived with that ache, and I lived not knowing the truth about where I came from. But we found each other, and now I want to use my voice not just to talk about progress, but about reconnection, about grace, about what happens when we stop pretending pain makes us weak." By the time he stepped off the stage, the room had erupted in a standing ovation. Later, Ava watched the recording from the couch, tissues bunched in her hand, shaking her head in disbelief. You didn't have to say all that, she murmured. Jack sat beside her. I wanted to, he said. The world sees me as this invincible figure. But what's the point of power if you can't use it to lift someone who made you possible? Ava looked at him, her son, who once had been lost to her, now sitting beside her like a second chance she never thought she'd deserve. That night, Ava asked to go outside, not just to the balcony, but down to the street. Jack hesitated at first, protective. But she insisted. I want to walk, she said, not hide. I want to feel the ground under my feet, not just as a ghost, but as someone seen. So they went. No bodyguards, no announcements. Just a mother and a son, shoulder to shoulder. People noticed. Some whispered, some stared. One woman, older, kind-eyed, stopped Ava gently and said, You're the woman in the photo, aren't you? Ava braced herself. But the woman smiled, eyes damp with emotion. I was in foster care too. Thank you for showing the rest of us it's never too late. Ava nodded, too moved to speak. She took Jack's hand and kept walking. When they returned home, Jack opened the small notebook they'd been filling together. Tonight, he said, you write the page. Ava smiled softly and took the pen. She didn't write much, just a few lines in neat, careful strokes. I was lost for a long time, but someone still came looking. Now, I am home. Jack read it once, then again, and he knew. Whatever the world said from here, whatever headlines or interviews followed, this right here, this page, this moment was the legacy that mattered most. Spring arrived quietly that year. The city thawed, and with it, so did something deep within Ava Carter. She no longer counted her steps like a stranger in borrowed space. She walked with confidence now, not in heels or polished shoes, but in soft-soled sneakers that Jack had picked out just for her. Comfort over image, wholeness over presentation. She had stopped asking if she was in the way. She no longer paused before taking food from the fridge or flinched when someone knocked on the door. In Jack's home, she had finally found something no shelter or street ever offered, a place where she didn't have to apologize for existing. Each morning, Ava opened the curtains in her room and let the sun in, not because she needed the light, but because she wanted it. She cooked breakfast most days, now real breakfast. Grits, eggs, bacon, sometimes toast if Jack didn't beat her to burning it. Jack loved watching her hum as she stirred the pot, her movements no longer stiff from survival, but soft with peace. They talked more these days. About everything and nothing, sometimes about the past, often about the present. Always with gratitude for the chance to say things that had waited 30 years to be spoken. One evening, Jack came home with something in his hands, a small wooden box, hand-carved. He set it on the coffee table and sat beside her. What's this? Ava asked. He opened the lid slowly. Inside were papers, some folded, some clipped together, and on top, a sleek booklet with a photo of both of them on the cover. The title read, The Distance Between Us, a Mother, a Son, a Story Found. Ava touched it gently. You finished it? She whispered. Jack nodded. I had it printed. Just 100 copies, for friends, family. People who've been through something similar. Ava's fingers lingered on the page. I never thought I'd see my story in print, not unless it was a police report. Jack smiled, taking her hand. You're not a footnote in someone else's file, Ava. You're the headline of your own story now. They began sharing it quietly, not to make money, not to go viral, but to give voice to others who thought they had none. A copy was donated to a women's shelter in Brooklyn, another to a foster care nonprofit in Chicago. They mailed one to a retired social worker who'd once comforted Ava in a hallway all those years ago. Each time a letter came back, Ava read it aloud. You reminded me that I'm not broken beyond repair. Your story helped me forgive my birth mother. I cried when I read it. I felt seen. The world had tried to erase Ava Carter, but now her name lived on pages, in people's hearts, in second chances passed down. One Saturday morning, they visited a small neighborhood library for a reading event. Jack had been invited to speak, but insisted Ava join him. He read the first chapter. She read the last. When she finished, a child, maybe 7 or 8, raised her hand and asked, "Are you really his mommy?" Ava smiled. "I really am." The girl grinned. "Good, you look like a nice one." Laughter filled the room, but Ava's smile didn't fade. It stayed all day. Back home that night, they sat on the couch, watching old black and white movies. Halfway through, Jack turned to her. "Do you miss anything about the life before this?" he asked. Ava paused. "The only thing I miss," she said, "is the version of you I didn't get to hold." Jack nodded slowly, then reached for her hand. "Well," he said, "I'm here now. And you can hold me any time." She laughed. "That might get awkward at board meetings." They both chuckled, and for a while said nothing else. The kind of silence that doesn't come from absence but from completion. On a quiet afternoon weeks later, Ava stood in front of a small community center where Jack had helped fund a new resource wing. He named it after her, the Ava Carter Center for Women and Children. At the ribbon-cutting ceremony, Jack spoke simply. "This building is for every mother who was told she wasn't enough, for every woman who felt invisible, for every child still searching for where they came from. My mother was once all of those things, and now she is the reason others will never have to be." As applause filled the street, Ava stood beside him, tears streaking silently down her cheeks. But they weren't tears of grief this time. They were the tears of someone who had found her way home. That night, after the crowd had gone and the cameras turned off, Ava stood on the rooftop of the building, staring up at the stars. Jack joined her, 2 mugs of cocoa in hand. She took hers, sipped quietly, then looked over. "I never thought life would feel this full again," she said. Jack looked at her, the woman who once held him as a baby in a hospital corridor, scared and alone. Neither did I. They stood there together, 2 silhouettes beneath a soft night sky, not mother and son lost in tragedy, but family restored. No longer broken, no longer searching. No longer wondering what could have been, just living. Finally. Life rarely gives us what we expect, but sometimes it gives us a second chance. This story reminds us that time may separate people, but love endures. Jack Callahan grew up believing he had been abandoned. His mother, Ava, lived in shame, believing she'd never be forgiven. But when truth met grace, what once felt lost was found. Many of us carry quiet questions about family, about the past, about choices we were forced to make. And yet, healing doesn't always come through answers. Sometimes it begins with being seen, with choosing compassion over judgment, with saying, "You still matter." Whether you're a parent longing for reconciliation or an adult child yearning to understand where you came from, know this: it's never too late to come home, not to a house, but to one another. Forgiveness is not forgetting the past. It's choosing to write a better ending. Because at any age, whether 30 or 70, belonging is still the most beautiful gift we can give each other.